Good morning. It'll just be a few minutes. Right back. Hang it. Sorry about that. It'll just be a few more minutes before we get started. Good morning, everyone. Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 9:05 a.m., so let's go ahead and get started. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein, and welcome to our 5th installment of my virtual office hours on a weekly basis. People have said that they really appreciate, these weekly meetings where I'm kind of giving people general updates on what's happened over the last week and answering some of their questions. So, and from a Facebook Live address, it works out fairly well as far as people being able to give me feedback as far as answering questions. keep in mind for your friends that they do not need to actually have a Facebook Live or a Facebook account in order to watch this Facebook Live feed. And I'll be putting the link to that to where all my videos are up so that people can, if just follow that URL, and then they can see what I'm saying on a weekly basis. So, we continue to live in difficult times, extraordinary times to say the least. And, over the last month and a half, things have changed quite rapidly. But I'm hoping that everyone is staying healthy. I'm hoping that you're well, both physically and mentally well. And I just wanted to give you these updates, provide some words of encouragement, and hopefully, help you make it through the week, which, for a lot of people, it was difficult. And the longer we stay in the shelter in place, the more it affects them physically, mentally. And I think, people appreciate that I'm talking to people. And as much as we're not seeing each other face to face, I think that's a difficult thing right now, that you're not getting that same social interaction that you normally get. So remember to take breaks in your backyard, take a walk around the block, take a break from the stress, and definitely don't be a news junkie if you don't have to, because that, the constant barrage of news can also can affect you physically. So the important thing is sheltering in place has helped, and keep doing it. Definitely we've seen a flattening of the curve, and we'll talk a little bit more about, there are continue to be cases later. We'll talk about the number of COVID cases that are still happening. That being said, we are seeing maybe a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not going to make that call right now, but I've heard, our governor, our president talk about, what will happen as far as opening up everything after the shelter in place. So the important thing, keep following the county health orders in order to flatten out the curve, and hopefully we'll see that downtick sometime soon. Remember that you can do your part by preventing the spread of the virus. And that's just a few things. One of which is, of course, continuing to wash your hands. I'll say this week in and week out, but that's the best way when you're out, when you're touching things, when you've gone to the grocery. As soon as you get home, immediately wash your hands. When you're touching any hard surfaces, that's a good habit. It's a good habit. When my mom and dad told it to me as a kid, it's still a good habit. Don't touch your face. Maintain social distance. And so that 6-foot distance is, still being required when you're out. And then, of course, only go out for essential items. Is it an essential trip? Remember that the number of people that you directly make contact with or exposed to has a direct impact on the number of cases that we're seeing in our communities. And remember the county recommendation to wear masks. Wear a mask. It definitely helps. And we'll talk about masks a little bit later. And the good news, of course, is the Bay Area is definitely flattening that curve. We're seeing different things around the nation, and New York thought they were doing well, and then there was a peak earlier this week, a new spike. So we're not out of the woods. We're definitely not we haven't solved the problem. That being said, we've done better than certain areas, and we just need to keep working at it until we start lessening the conditions. And the other thing was, of course, CDC last week reminded us that even though you're not showing the conditions, you might be spreading the virus. So 25% of the people that have the virus don't show any conditions. So having that mask on when you're out is making sure that feel healthy, but you have the virus at the moment, but you're not spreading it to other people. And of course, let's thank the doctors, the nurses, the grocery workers, restaurant workers, all the essential workers that are out there putting their lives on the line every day. So there's a lot of funds to either, help, give dinners, lunches to the healthcare workers. There's funds to build PPE masks. So there's face shields being provided to all of our healthcare workers. Make sure that if you have the money, fund them, fund Sunnyvale Community Services. Make sure that if you can give back, definitely do give back. But whatever you're doing, be safe, be healthy. So let's go ahead and get to what's happened over the last week. And it's been a busy week, as far as conferences and press conferences and conference calls. We're now 31 days, a full month into the shelter in place. So that started on March 16th. The county order, or the multi-county order, went in place. And on March 17th was the first day, St. Patrick's Day, for that shelter in place that affected Santa Clara County. And so since that declaration, a lot has happened. A lot more happens every day. As far as updates from the federal, state, county level, I have a lot of conference calls to listen into, to talk on, just watching, the dueling press conferences that sometimes happen at the county, state, and federal level. I might have one ear on one conference and another ear on another conference, depending upon what's happening at a specific press conference. So that's a little look into my life as far as that, as well as, of course, balancing, my daytime job. But that's not for this conversation. So on Tuesday night, Sunnyvale City Council met remotely for our third time on the 8x8 conference system, and it was pretty successful. It's like, I think we're finally getting a hang of it. We didn't have as many technical difficulties as we had during the second meeting, and overall things went well. We are taking public comments, and so this is just a reminder for people that want to speak on the items that are coming in front of council. We are taking public comments, so either writing an email ahead of time or before, basically the public comment period closes on a specific item on the agenda. The city clerk will go ahead and read those out, up to 3 minutes, of course. And then there's also a phone number that if people want to call and talk in their own words on a specific item and give basically testimony for a specific item before the meeting, because we need to listen to it and correspond it to a specific agenda item, the city clerk is ready to do that also. So we're making it a little bit easier for residents to give feedback while city council is meeting. But in general, it's like it's a work in progress. Some people have requested, to be part of that meeting and visually being displayed and doing public comment. That has had some issues, let's say in other jurisdictions, and we're not completely ready to do that. We are looking at it, but we'll see where that goes. So the Sunnyvale City Council had one major item, and that was basically on a small business assistance program. So Sunnyvale City Council approved a small business assistance program relating to, of course, the COVID-19 emergency. So 4 weeks ago, on March 17th, Council authorized $250,000 to go to Sunnyvale Community Services to provide emergency assistance, financial assistance, basically, to residents that were completely impacted by the pandemic. And that assistance was rent, it was utility payments, it was whatever financial needs our residents had. And so Sunnyvale Community Services has been working with that money to basically help residents. Now, what we've been discussing at a council level, and the city manager has been talking to the business community, is what can we do for the businesses in our community. So what we authorized Tuesday night was the creation of a small business assistance program for brick and mortar businesses that have been hit by the pandemic. And so we didn't set all the criteria. We basically said it was for brick and mortar businesses. We said loans up to $15,000. And we didn't, and what we did was making a matching program. So as opposed to just what we did with the grant program to Sunnyvale Community Services, is we said, here's $250,000, please do good with it in our community. What we're doing now is taking what we did Tuesday night was do $600,000 to match outside donations for the Small Business Assistance Program. So we had several, big companies that said we want to help out the small businesses in Sunnyvale, and we couldn't do that. We didn't previously have a business assistance program, and so council had to authorize that from a council standpoint, so the city manager and staff can move forward. So that program will allow grants up to $15,000 to cover expenses for qualifying small businesses in Sunnyvale. And right now, all that criteria, all that timeline hasn't been finalized. Staff will work with the Enterprise Foundation to refine eligibility requirements and establish, and the Enterprise Foundation will establish and administer that program. And so people might not have heard about the Enterprise Foundation, and it's a Bay Area nonprofit that the city's been working with for about 15 years, and they assist small businesses to develop business plans and marketing plans, to provide assistance through the SBA programs. So we've been working with them for some time and utilizing their services, and so they were ultimately a very good match as far as administering this program. And I'm overjoyed to report that several local high-tech companies have already committed, $400,000 to this fund. So Google, and thank you, Google, for committed $300,000, and LinkedIn committed $100,000. So we already have the $400,000, from those two companies, which of course the city will be matching. So that's immediately $800,000. And we have other companies that are interested. And so we've been talking to them for a while. Let's see. Oh, and I just wanted to clarify yet again, and I get this question from the small businesses already. Where's the link? What's the criteria? That's not fully finalized yet. And until we authorized, city staff to work with the Enterprise Foundation, we couldn't define all that. And we didn't want to do it quickly. We wanted them and the experts to kind of go through and figure out what the criteria are. As soon as that's available, the city will, has already been talking to the businesses, but they'll publicize that to make it very clear. And there'll be more information as soon as that program, is available to all of our businesses. Council did a second thing on Tuesday. Besides that $600,000 match, Council also authorized $150,000 for grants to nonprofit agencies that are serving Sunnyvale residents and businesses related to the COVID-19 emergency. So this is, programs like Meals on Wheels, Sunnyvale Community Services conceivably can apply again, but a lot of these smaller aid agencies that are serving, Sunnyvale residents, this is a way for those nonprofits, which especially during this time, a lot of them aren't able to get enough donations. There's a lot of people asking for donations, and a lot of the big names get the donations. This is to make sure that they can help. Also, I've also been talking to, Congressman Khanna about what's going to happen at the federal level, and conceivably there's additional CDBG money that will be given to Sunnyvale to give to these nonprofits. We're working on that, and but between $250,000 for Sunnyvale Community Services, $600,000 for a business program, another $150,000 for the nonprofit agencies. That's $1 million that Sunnyvale has set aside to try to help out at the business and residential level within our community. And I know, the need is far greater than that, as we've seen this week, as far as, the PPP program from the federal level that the Small Business Association immediately was oversubscribed, and that money ran out. I'm sure that we're not going to have enough money to meet all the needs. That being said, it's important to set up these criteria and kind of let the programs go, and hopefully, we help as many businesses as we can. So it's not an assumed $15,000 max. It's, maybe it's $5,000 for some businesses, 10 for others, 15 for others. I'm not really sure how that criteria, what the funding levels will be, but it's important that, we try to help our businesses make it through this time, and our residents. So that's critical. And of course, from a residential standpoint, that's one of the things that we have been doing, for our previous 2 council meetings. So, the week before last, we declared a state of emergency for another 60 days, which we needed to do, of course, after our first March 17th declaration. But we also approved no increase for rates for water service and garbage collection, as well as we extended the suspension of interruption of water service. So until June 30th, 2020. So from that standpoint, it's like we're trying to help out the residents from a billing standpoint for those critical utilities, and all those critical utilities, garbage, sewer, water, are operating normally. Definitely we had to cancel, some of the extra dump weekends, but your garbage is being picked up every week. The water is fresh and clean, and you don't need to go out and buy tons of bottled water. That's, that isn't required. This isn't an earthquake sort of thing. This is staying at home and sheltering in place, slightly different than going through an earthquake, and making sure that you're prepared for that. And then, of course, the week before that, so 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago, what we did was we put an eviction moratorium in place. And so on April 3rd, council did that. Now that was on top of what the county had already did. So it was just to clarify and extend a few measures that the county had already done. So the county's moratorium is in place until the end of May. And we did basically, the counties declared the eviction moratorium for residential and commercial residents until May 31st. What we did was extend that to 2 things. Also mobile home residents, because that wasn't really clarified in the county order. And then we made it 180 days as opposed to the county's 120-day payback, 180 days after the termination of the state of emergency. So we've extended that. The county's already dealing with late fees and making sure that their ordinance, which applied to all 15 cities in the county, specified 120 days, no late fees. There's a lot of things that the county did, but ours clarified just a few of those. And then, of course, the city's been doing a social media campaign, reached out to landlords to raise awareness of this eviction moratorium. There's a flyer that's both in English and in Spanish that is out there. If you need the link for that, reach out to me. I've sent that to multiple residents who, we're still hearing, as bad as it is, that we're still hearing from a few renters that landlords have, let's say, been a little overbearing as far as getting their rent, and threatening, from a county or from a state level. That isn't going to be happening. The county courts are not seeing eviction requests anytime soon. So from that standpoint, that isn't going to happen. That being said, there are multiple, landlords that I've heard of that are threatening their residents that they're going to start this eviction proceedings and all that. They can't do much right now. So if you have an issue, and I mentioned this last week, but if you're a renter and a landlord does have an issue, is threatening, please contact Sunnyvale, and more importantly, please contact Project Sentinel. So this is a nonprofit that Sunnyvale gives a certain amount of funding every year to deal with landlord-renter mediation. And so you can go to their website at housing.org, or you can call the specific Sunnyvale mediation number, which is 408-470-3744. And, this is a difficult time for everyone, and I can understand why some of the landlords and apartment owners are worried because they need to pay their mortgage. And some institutions have said that they're waiving fees, and that the owners don't need to pay the mortgage on the complex conceivably for some time, depending upon the institution. That being said, this is a time for everybody to work together. The whole concept of people out of work, and I'm hearing that more and more. The number of people laid off is just very, very difficult. And where you live, being able to shelter in place is critical. And so that's important, very important right now. And so definitely reach out to the city, reach out to Project Sentinel if you or someone is being threatened. And so I've had multiple people that I've helped out this week, and hopefully we're going to see less of that as people learn about what their rights are, as well as landlords realize that this is a tough time, and you have to allow people to shelter in place, and hopefully they will get their money when this is all over. So other things from a federal and a state level, we've started hearing talk about reopening. So I think it's great to talk about, but we're still at a very early stage. We are still under shelter in place guidelines, and I think that those guidelines actually can conceivably go more. So from that standpoint, I could see them being extended a lot longer. From a presidential press conference, the president hopes that most states will reopen on May 1st or sooner. And we'll see where that goes. Tuesday's press briefing at a Tuesday press conference, Governor Newsom said it's different region to region. Governor Newsom has been talking to the governors of Oregon as well as Washington State, and trying to figure out what the right time frame is, what they're doing. So I'm glad to see that regional discussion happening. That being said, the virus is very local. This is a different county to county basis, and so we'll see how those measures go. It depends on a lot of things. Of course, adequate screening. Is there screening for people that may or may not have the virus? Are there enough beds, staffing, PPE equipment, or personal protective equipment to treat the patients, as well as all of the hospital staff and healthcare officials? I'm hearing, from either Dr. Fauci or Dr. Cody, there's been a lot of discussions about, making sure that we're prepared, and we're not, as I said previously, we're not out of the woods. It's important that everybody continue to do their part. And then as we watch the counts go, and the important thing is the key to reopening is tied to available testing. So we'll see how much testing we have, and there's new tests coming out every day. And how quickly those can ramp up. We thought that we were actually going to start in Sunnyvale. We thought we were going to have a drive-through testing starting on Monday, and that was all going to be by appointment only. I think it started in Milpitas, I think Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. That being said, Milpitas ended up only testing 2 cases because the county is looking at how many new cases we're seeing, and whether or not to distribute that testing around the Bay Area or keep it in kind of the limited number of locations that they already have. They decided not to actually do that. So they had met with staff, they had figured out the location, the kind of the drive through at the community center, and then decided that the case numbers aren't growing rapidly, since we're kind of seeing a leveling off, that it's important that, we don't just open up centers to just open up centers, and making sure that we have enough equipment and enough testing to provide for everyone in the county. So we'll see where that goes. Right now, definitely I would like to have something in Sunnyvale. That being said, if we don't need it, if the county thinks that from a resource standpoint, there are other portions of the county that they're more worried about, then that's the county's call to a large degree. So, and then, the county gives a daily update on the number of COVID cases. I'll give a quick summary of that. So we had 4 new deaths yesterday. So that brings a countywide total to 69. Sorry. And the county has also reported 40 new cases, bringing the total number of confirmed cases in the county to 1,833. So that represents about a 10% positivity rate across the 17,000 total tests that have been done. And there's, multiple hundreds of tests that are pending. So, it's the test results aren't immediate, and we're starting to see, more approved tests as far as that's concerned. We'll see how quickly this ends up being going forward from a county standpoint. But, that's an important thing. If you go to the dashboard, so the county is very open as far as the dashboard is concerned, showing how many hospital beds are available, what the counts are, what the death counts are, and making sure that everybody knows, what's happening. So we're still seeing cases. Hopefully we'll see a downtick sometime in the next week or two, and I think that'll be important. On Thursday, April 2nd, is when the county made recommendations for all residents to start wearing reusable non-medical face covering. So, you see my icon, wearing face coverings of different types, whether or not that's a bandana or some sort of cloth that was made at home. That's been a recommendation since April 2nd. So it's been several weeks now. That being said, I was on a call with Dr. Cody earlier this week, and I asked about whether or not Santa Clara would make face coverings required. And it's already been done. They did it in Riverside last week. They did it in Sonoma. So Riverside County last week made face coverings of some sort. And we're not talking about N95 masks. We're talking about simple face coverings. Riverside County did it last week. Sonoma did it at the beginning of the week or the end of last week. They defined it. I think today it officially that order went into place. So, this was something that hasn't been done yet in Santa Clara County. That being said, there will be a press release later today, and at least from some of the Chronicle reports this morning, that'll be multiple counties will be doing that same thing. So it'll be, if you're outside of your home, if you're in a public building, so if you're in a restaurant, if you're in Target or, some other store that's open, the Osh or the Home Depot, everyone needs to be wearing a face covering. And then outside, if you can't maintain safe social distancing, so for whatever reason, you're at a park or and there's the trails aren't wide enough, and you actually have to pass close by to people, wearing some sort of face covering is important. So, that hasn't been defined yet, but there will be a press conference later today. So I think that ultimately will be the case, how the county order has changed. And I keep seeing people not wearing cloth masks or bandanas in public, and it's not as much an issue if you're walking around the block. But when I see, especially, going to Safeway and having multiple people in very narrow aisles, passing each other, touching things, whatever, I was shocked, earlier this week to see, people not wearing masks. So, that is a good recommendation, and I think it'll be a requirement sometime soon. And if you need masks, definitely reach out to me. There are lots of people that are making them. There's lots of things that you can follow online as far as, making masks yourself. I've been delivering them to the doorsteps for multiple people when I'm doing my daily takeout order at different restaurants around the city. So if you need masks, reach out. Last week, I delivered 50 masks to the shelter because they didn't have masks, and especially the kids. There's lots of families there. There were 18 kids there. They didn't have kid-sized masks. So that was an important thing that a group of people made, fast masks specifically for kids' faces. And then, there were Mickey Mouse, and there were, lively colors, things of that nature that I think was really good from that standpoint. So to make it kind of fun for kids to be wearing masks is not an easy sort of thing when, they might not understand why we're doing this and why people have to do this. And one of the things that I'd like to kick off is a contest for the best face covering decoration. So, I know we have a lot of artistic people in our community. I would love to see either logos or what people are doing with their face masks, or just decorating a plain color with, a face, a smile. I think that's an important thing. If everybody's out in the community wearing masks, you don't see facial expressions. So it's going to be interesting. And so providing, something whimsical from a face mask standpoint, I think will be really good. Send me your photos. I'll have a post sometime in the next day or two for people to post, their creative ideas on how they've either created a different type of face mask or just decorated a plain face mask to make it more friendly. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I'm sure our Sunnyvale residents will do a fantastic job. And let's see. Next, I wanted to go back and every week now remind people to fill out their census 2020. The national average is, I think around 48%, 50% now. But more importantly is what Sunnyvale's response is. So a week ago, it was around 57.8%. And now it's above 60%. So we got 3% more people who responded in the last week. So that's good. It's like, definitely, if you haven't responded yet, if you know neighbors, if you're passing by, or if you're doing a conference call with neighbors, check in to see if they've actually filled out their census, because it is fairly simple. You can either go to my2020census.gov or call 844-330-2020, and then you can fill out your census. You don't need the number if you had your card with the actual number on it, and you don't know what happened to it. You don't need that. You can call and fill out your census anyway. They will check your information. They will contact you. All that is available. Okay, let's go ahead and get to some questions that I got over the last week. First, what are critical infrastructure projects and what's happening in Sunnyvale? So the county health order 2 weeks ago changed what were essential businesses that could actually, or essential projects that could actually happen. So initially, all residential projects development were seen as essential. And then with the order 2 weeks ago, that was changed to be only residential projects that had 10% or more of affordable housing, and I'll say, critical infrastructure projects. So you'll still see, it's like downtown, the City Line development. It's still developing. It's still building, apartments at the corner of Iowa and TAFE, mainly because 12.5% of those apartments will be affordable. And so there are a few projects that are going on from a residential standpoint, and all of our like multifamily condo developments. Sunnyvale has had a requirement for many, many years to actually have 12.5% of those condos be below market rate. And so those BMR units basically allow that residential development to continue, because at the end of the day, 12.5% of those will go to low income, very low income residents that can basically finally have a home. But from a city standpoint, the city manager went through and with his staff to figure out what the critical projects were, and that which ones will continue and which ones will not continue. So for those that are continuing, just to kind of give you a quick overview, one of which is, of course, the storm pump station number 1, so the wastewater treatment plant, which is, a $800 million multi-decade effort to redo our old wastewater treatment plant. That is continuing, of course. So the storm pump station, the several intersections, Matilda and Indio, have been working. Pavement rehabilitation, the Fair Oaks overhead bridge repair. So this is a great time to work on the bridge. Let's see, and some of the traffic signal hardware, Maud Avenue streetscape, the traffic signals, working on Maud Avenue, that's critical. So certain projects, especially with reduced traffic, it's actually a good time to actually work on those projects, because you're not directly affecting residents as much. There's not a lot of cars on the road. There aren't as many bikes or people walking. So that's actually a great time to do those projects. For projects that were under construction and now are stopped during construction, that was several projects, and let me go through that, because I think that's more important. Here's what isn't continuing. One of which is the golf building renovations at Sunken Gardens. So that was about 55% complete. So that is on hold for the time being. The Washington Community Swim Center, so the Washington Park Swim Center that we finally approved earlier this year, or approved last year, funded, chose the artwork for earlier this year. They tore down the old swim center, and it was supposed to open next summer. Hopefully, this time that we've stopped that construction won't directly affect it. It's about 15% into completion, so they've torn it down. They started digging. I might do a post about what construction's already been done there. They've dug out where the new pool will be. They tore down all the old pool and the bleachers. So that's on hold. Concrete, sidewalk, curb, gutter, driveway replacement, and tree removal that was supposed to continue. That's not happening, during this time. And then the slurry seal is on hold right now. So we'll catch up to this when the shelter in place orders kind of start lifting. But for now, these projects were on hold. Okay, one of the other questions that I've gotten from several people are city ordinances say that vehicles on public streets have to be moved every 72 hours or they can be ticketed. Has any consideration been given to either suspending that ordinance or at least not enforcing it during the shelter in place? So I've discussed this with the city manager a little bit. Right now, and the city attorney, more importantly, because we're talking about conceivably changing the ordinance. Right now, the easiest thing to do was not enforcing that ordinance. So, if people, and I talked with the city chief about this, and the chief addressed it with his patrol officers. they will make attempts. So it's still, the enforcement was only done on a complaint driven, on only complaint driven, meaning, if somebody is parked in front of your house for a week, then you need to call public safety. And what they will normally come do is put a put a sign on the front windshield. And if it's not moved for another 72 hours, then that car is towed. So that enforcement, unless it's been, immediately blocking a driveway or blocking a intersection, then they can be towed immediately, because you basically preventing access to public right of way. That being said, if it's just parked legally on the street, that is when people can report the car 72 hours after an additional posting by public safety. Then that car will be towed. So what's happening now is public safety is contacting the registered owner of that car, and to basically avoid a tow and avoid citing that person. And that's the, as opposed to changing the law and then having to change it back. Or, it's important that people still have the right, conceivably there's an important reason for them to not have a car parked in front of their house, or conceivably report a car because, this might be a stolen car or something of that nature. But that being said, the public safety officers are do it all attempts to contact the registered owner to have them move that car. Conceivably, it's only after it's already been sitting there for a week. So that's the important thing. Another question, any ideas? And so this was kind of a rehash of what I talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago now. Any ideas on what I can do to help or better pass the time while sheltering in place? So definitely sheltering in place is very stressful. Remember to take breaks, spend some time in your backyard, walk around the block, bike or visit a local park if you can. Always maintain that 6-foot distance. But, people have been binging things on Netflix and Hulu, or watching news. And as I said previously, don't be a news junkie. That can just add to your stress at the end of the day. But there's a lot of things that you can do while you're at home. First, of course, is the Census 2020, which we already talked about. If you haven't filled out your census, do it today. It's critical for funding, from federal funding that comes to Sunnyvale. So we need an accurate count as much as possible. You can also apply for boards and commissions. And so there are quite a few boards and commission positions that are open. Right now, we have, I think, 17 different boards and commissions open. And these are important because they provide recommendations to council. They do additional public outreach and public feedback in order to help council make the right decisions. And some decisions are made actually at that board level or at that commission level. But it's important that if people want to get more involved, now is the time to apply, so that once the shelter in place is finished, you can actually be more of a part of a board and commission. Although we actually this week, over the last 2 weeks, have started having, much like city council, having some of our commissions also do remote meetings. So we had our Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Advocacy Commission meet last night, and then the Planning Commission met previously. So we're basically doing the remote meeting for conferencing for our boards and commissions, as well as for council itself. And applications for boards and commissions are due 5 p.m. on April 30th, so Thursday, April 30th. And then there will be interviews, and we'll see how those interviews will be scheduled. But if you're interested, go to the city website, sunnyvale.ca.gov, and search for boards and commissions. Or you can call the city clerk at 408-730-7483. One of the other things, are you a knitter or crocheter? The Cozy Cap campaign, and I know it's getting to be, kind of warm out, but what they do on a yearly basis is they have a lot of people crochet or knit caps, basically hats for people to wear, and they give them to the homeless. They give them in the homeless shelters. They make sure that people that need warm head covering will have it available. You can, of course, read a book. Definitely the Sunnyvale Public Library has a full catalog of online books available, magazines, audiobooks. You can access that, and that's one way. I listened to a book last week called Inheritance, and actually am joining a online book club, I think next week, to talk about that book. So it's actually very good from that standpoint that you can still, access media, you can still read or listen to a book as I did this past week, and still have that social interaction of book clubs, a meeting on a conference call. You can learn to cook, try a new recipe. There's a lot of people that are cooking for the first time in a long time. As much as I, keep promoting ordering out, and our local restaurants definitely need people doing takeout orders, doing delivery. That being said, a lot of people are learning to cook for the first time. So there's tons of online videos, lots of cookbooks, lots of online recipes to have you try out that new dish that you've always been wanting to make. You can repair broken items. You can, lots of people are doing spring cleaning right now, going through their attics, going through their garages, going through their basements. Definitely, you might have a lot of things to give away or throw away. We are currently allowing 2 additional garbage bags to be put out with your garbage. So if you have things that you're throwing away, that can't be repaired, that can't be given away. And I know Goodwill was open. It closed down last week. So right now you can't do that. There are several shoe donations and clothes donation bins around the city, but a lot of those have even been filled up because they're not being collected. So you might have to hold this stuff off for a little bit. Don't just immediately throw it away. But that's important, that at least if you do have things that have to be discarded, because we didn't have the additional dump weekends, we are collecting additional garbage bags. You can mend clothes. You can do a deep cleaning of your house. You can declutter that closet. And then, of course, gardening. A lot of people, the weather has been good, not so good today, but the weather has been fairly good. We're getting into that spring, summer time frame. And Lowe's and Home Depot are open. And they're considered essential services. So consider, working in your garden if you have that available to you. Planting. It's a good time to consider planting a victory garden. So my wife and I were working in the garden all last weekend, and so that's a very good thing from that standpoint, as far as planting tomatoes, planting kale and lettuce and peppers. I think we're almost out of the last frost, and you can go to your local nursery and hopefully they'll have, good plants available, or start them from seed. It's like we do have time, and we've been doing that. And nurseries will do curbside pickup if you call ahead and place an order. So, you don't necessarily need to go in to pick things up, or you can order online if worse comes to worse. You can order seeds. We've actually planted a lot of seeds and germinated that at our home. You can learn something that you've always wanted to play. It's like an instrument. You can learn to sing or drawing, painting, dancing. There's tons of videos online, and YouTube University or lots of other videos that people who want to pick up an instrument for the first time, exercise. You can exercise, do yoga, Pilates, dance. There's lots of things that you can do while you're sheltering in place. I talked about this last time, touring the world from your home. There's lots of museums that have virtual tours. Earlier this week, I watched the Globe Theater. The Globe is streaming Hamlet on the YouTube until this Sunday. So if you search for a Globe Theater Hamlet YouTube, you'll have to subscribe to their YouTube channel. That being said, it was really unique. I've traveled the world. I still haven't visited the Globe Theatre in England, but to see that theater, and it was great sound, great visuals from a performance done about 2 years ago. But it was great to see it, and it was interesting in retrospect to see the crowds watching it and see the crowd's reaction, especially when we don't see crowds now. When in this time of social distancing, it's odd to look at crowds. You might have seen Bocelli's opera last weekend, and to have him alone, basically in a big auditorium, was an astounding sight. But here, to see this video of Hamlet done 2 years ago was actually with the crowd and the crowd reactions and the crowd laughter was a fun thing to watch. You can research places that you might want to visit when you finally get a chance to, when the shelter in place finally finishes. So, the Getty, visiting the Monterey Bay Aquarium, they have live cams, the San Diego Zoo, lots of places. Write a letter or card, or thank you card to people. It's appreciative. And then just check in on a friend, give them a call. I've talked to several friends that I haven't talked to for over a year in the last few weeks. Text them, do a FaceTime call with them, whatever you can do to try to bridge that social divide. Right now, it's really important that you have that, because we've lost that. And sheltering in place, we all need to be sheltering in place, but it's hard not to have that social interaction. Zoom meetings are really important. Lots of people have been reading books online, so story time for kids. I saw LeVar Burton's reading, and the whole Reading Rainbow kind of revived in a video last week. I'll actually be reading 2 Dr. Seuss books tonight at 6 p.m. if you want to come back and visit this feed. So that's some of the things that you can do. Let me see if there's any immediate questions. Let's see. Is a dental office considered a small business? Yes, it is. So so from a criteria standpoint, I'm not sure what the operation is, but dental offices are essential businesses. They are open, although a lot of them have closed. The dental industry is kind of the most exposed if people actually have COVID-19, and so that's really important. There's a question about Nimitz Elementary and the grounds being taped off 2 days ago. Yeah, I've contacted city staff on that. Haven't heard back yet why that's done. I'm not sure if it's the city or the school district that decided to close that. That being said, we've had several reports of kids either playing basketball or soccer. The city staff has put more signs up in different areas to remind people that this is the time of social distancing. You're not supposed to be playing interactive sports. A family can conceivably play basketball. If it's people that you're sheltering in place with, that's fine. But going out and meeting people and playing sports is not allowed. That's one of the reasons why we closed the basketball courts, the tennis courts, the skate parks a few weeks ago. Let's see, any other questions? Let's see. And who's paying the landlord's bills if the tenant using this is using COVID-19 as a way to pay? This is an ongoing issue. This is one of the things of there's bad landlords and there's bad tenants. Right now, there isn't a measure to deal with landlord issues, and I've heard from multiple landlords that have also complained about something like this. Hopefully, this is one of the reasons why we're trying to be fair. But I've heard of too many landlords that have already, tried to basically take advantage of and evict residents that have lost work and can't pay their bills right now. And hopefully, once we end the shelter in place and they have a job again, they'll be able to repay that as quickly as possible. Let's see. And then, and then of course the distancing. It's like one of the things that San Mateo County put in place was you couldn't basically recreate more than 5 miles from your home. Santa Clara County didn't do that. San Mateo basically said you couldn't go to a park, you couldn't drive to a park more than 5 miles from your home. I think they've issued a few orders on that, but haven't really done that much. But that's, I don't think we'll do that here. I think especially as things open up, we'll see more, we'll allow more people to meet together. And I think we'll when we start opening things up, we'll see a similar ratcheting up as we ratcheted down. So groups of 10 or less, 50 or less, or 100 or less. But we'll see how those measures go and how quickly we can get to that point. Right now, the most important thing is to make sure that we continue our social distancing, that we help prevent the spread of this virus. Let's see. It's after 10, so, let me go ahead and wrap up, I guess. I think I got to most of the questions. And if I didn't get to your question, definitely put it online, put it in the comments section. I'll respond to it, via text in the comments and or bring it up in next week's meeting. It's important that I hope that your answers are, your questions are being answered, as well as any concerns that you have. It's good, and this is one of the reasons why I did do office hours and why I started them 3.5 years ago. It's a good dialogue, and conceivably you might not agree with everything that I or council does, but it's important for you to be heard. It's important to make sure that council is listening to what the residents are saying. So with that, let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again today. Please email me any questions or comments throughout the week at council@larryklein.com. The pandemic puts our lives in perspective. I'm happy to really see our community response. I'm overjoyed to see Sunnyvale Community Services and how much they've stepped up and they've met that challenge. They've served, over 1,000. Basically, they gave produce to over 1,000 families earlier this week. I think on Monday they served another 700 drive-through families on Wednesday. It's really amazing to see the efforts that they've done and their volunteers are doing on a daily basis. From, Maker Nexus has been doing a great job creating face shields for health workers, to small groups of neighbors that are sewing on a daily basis to create face masks for neighbors that don't know how to sew, or don't know where to get face masks, or don't want to get out in the community but need that protection. And so that's been fantastic. If you're out on a walk, definitely smile to people, wave to people, say hello at a safe social distance. People miss this social interaction, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm getting such a positive feedback from people who've attended this virtual meeting or watching it later, even is getting this kind of discussion, getting your questions answered, as well as just hearing what's going on in the community in a fairly summarized level. And Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. I think that the Bay Area has dealt with a lot here, but it's coming through it. It will come through it okay. We are all in this together. We will get through this together. And I just want to thank everyone for listening. And until next week, stay safe and have a good week. Thank you. Goodbye.